And welcome back, Stack in the Box listeners, to the Week 11 NFL recap. I am Mike Luciano, as always, returning, and this time we have a special guest. It is the co-host of the Jet Press podcast with yours truly, Justin Freed. So as you can imagine, we're just in a fantastic mood after what happened, the atrocity that happened last Sunday. But you know what? Week 11 was better than that. It wasn't all 32-6 and CFL level offenses. There were a lot of beatdowns, a lot of walk-offs, a lot of craziness. And that's what we're going to get into. So, Justin, irrespective of Zach Wilson and Tim Boyle, how are we feeling?
Irrespective of that, I'm feeling great. If you include that, because that's kind of been the majority of the last 48 hours for us, it's not been that great, or 28, 24 hours, whatever it's been. It's not been that great. But other than that, if we're not talking Jets, we're not talking Zach Wilson, I'm feeling pretty good.
So we'll talk about some real football, not the Jets. We'll touch on them a little bit, but we'll talk mostly real football in this recap. But first, we got a message from our friends over at Sleeper, because Stack in the Box is partnering with Sleeper Daily Fantasy to give new users a first deposit match up to $100. All you got to do is use our code FANSIDED2. That's FANSIDED2. When signing up to receive your deposit match, please remember to always game responsibly. Scan the QR code in the top left corner of the screen for the YouTube folks to see if you qualify. So, as much as we can moan about it, the Jets were not the main story of last week. If anything, I think the main story came in the 1 o'clock window in a game that, in terms of pure nauseation, whatever the conjunction is, difficultness to watch. Even though they're two nominal playoff teams, that Cleveland-Pittsburgh game, which the Browns won 13-10, that's going to set football back 100 years, like every Steelers game is this year. And we're experts in this subject because we know bad quarterbacks as well as anybody knows bad quarterbacks. And while there is a lot to talk about Myles Garrett, I think kind of running away with Defensive Player of the Year now, and Cleveland's defense being so historically good, I think that they're a viable playoff team, even with the Deshaun Watson injury quarterback. As much as I want to make it into a celebration of Cleveland and how they've overcome injuries to Watson and Nick Chubb, which was thought that was supposed to be their whole offense, Nick Chubb, when that went down. The story is Pittsburgh, and the story is Kenny Pickett. And they're getting into a very Jets-like dance. Is it Kenny Pickett? Is it Matt Canada, the offensive coordinator? And if you've watched this show before, I've railed against Matt Canada over and over and over again because I think he is as unqualified a coordinator. Everywhere he's gone, he's been bad, and he keeps failing up, and here he is with the Steelers. But also, as we've seen with some other quarterbacks, sometimes you can't win with this poor quarterback play. And they've gotten unfathomably lucky, Pittsburgh has. They got outgained in every game this year, and they're still 6-4. But I feel like this might be the game that does it for Kenny Pickett. Not playing for the rest of the year, but I think this kind of crystallizes that this is the end for Kenny Pickett as a franchise quarterback. I think this kind of confirmed all the concerns we had about him. Number one, he's old. He was like 24, I think, as a rookie. He's got baby hands. 0th percentile baby hands for an NFL quarterback. The arm is whatever. He's not very accurate on shorter stuff, actually, which is funny because that's what they have him do a lot. His best throws are kind of like ropes down the sideline, occasionally like George Pickens or somebody like that. They don't really do that because they're so afraid of him actually having to use his arm. What really crystallized for me, I think of quarterbacks that have thrown as many attempts as Kenny Pickett has, he has the lowest touchdown percentage, and he is the only one that has one lower than 2%. Out of all of them, Kenny Pickett, only one. And it sucks because this Steelers team is so good. Even though the offensive personnel, I think, is a little bit limited, I think there are some really nice players like George Pickens. I think Jaylen Warren is kind of emerging as a nice compliment to Najee Harris. Ferocious defense. TJ Watt's great. Mike Tomlin, him and Belichick and Andy Reid are pretty much best coaches in the league, emeritus until they retire. Mike Tomlin's still kicking butt even where Belichick's not. And yet Kenny Pickett is ruining all of this. It's very last year Jets. Everything else is working around him, even in some adverse circumstances, and then Pickett just blows it.
Yeah, I don't want to rag on Pickett like too much because we're doing that already. Like we're gonna rag on him a lot, but there's some stats out there that are pretty damning. Like you already mentioned a touchdown right there. There are 3 quarterbacks. This is a stat that was tweeted out by NFL CBS. 3 quarterbacks that have more passing touchdowns than Kenny Pickett since the start of last season. Davis Mills, who has not played this year, or he came in for a brief second when CJ Stroud went out this past week, but he's not thrown a snap this year, or he's not thrown a pass this year. Marcus Mariota, and Matt Ryan, who have both also not played this season. All three of them have more passing touchdowns than Kenny Pickett does since the start of last year. Something is broken. In fact, with the Steelers, as you mentioned, it's a good comparison to Jets because there's a lot that's broken. It doesn't have to be one of Kenny Pickett or Matt Canada. It could be both of them. It could be that the entire offense is just really, really bad. I think you're right, though, that I feel like this past game was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. I feel like a lot of kind of staunch Kenny Pickett defenders have even come around and realized that, you know what, he's probably not the guy moving forward. Because honestly, Mike, what even is the upside with Kenny Pickett at this point? Even if you believe that he can become a serviceable quarterback, that he can be an NFL caliber starting quarterback, where's the upside? If he hits his ceiling, is he top 5? No. Is he top 10 if he hits his ceiling? Probably not.
Mac and Bryce Young, where they were sold on. Oh, he's really smart and gets the ball out quick. Well, he's not even doing that.
He's nuts. And obviously the situation isn't ideal. Matt Canada is a very bad offensive coordinator. I don't think many people are defending Matt Canada at this point. I don't think their offensive line is particularly great, but they have enough pieces in that skill position group that it should look better than what they've gotten. And I think this past weekend, we kind of just saw that Mike Tomlin voodoo magic, whatever he had done to get the Steelers to 6-3, it kind of just ran out. And I feel like their flaws as a team were very, very exposed. And the flaws start with the offense and it starts with the quarterback. Kenny Pickett's not the guy. I think the Steelers can still potentially sneak into the playoffs just because they have Mike Tomlin who finds ways to win. Their defense is still good enough. It's not as good as the Browns, but it is still good enough. But it's an uphill battle. You're fighting an uphill battle when your quarterback is Kenny Pickett and your offensive coordinator is Matt Canada. You know, and as far as the Browns go, like I agree. I think they are still a potential playoff team, and obviously now they're what 7-4, and they have a great defense, one of the maybe the best defense in the entire league. Unfortunate that their quarterback situation is what it is at this point. I like Dorian Thompson-Robinson's upside, and I think he can develop into a potentially good quarterback, but it's rookie Dorian Thompson-Robinson. This is a 5th-round pick we're talking about. The expectation shouldn't be significantly high. You just kind of want him to keep you in games. And if he doesn't, maybe you turn it over to Joe Flacco, who you just signed. But either way, I feel like this Browns Steelers game was the most AFC North of AFC North games. This was like old school, classic AFC North defense first, bad offense football. And then the result was exactly kind of what we expected it to be.
I have 2 guys on my wish list for the Steelers.
Okay.
Kirk Cousins.
Sure, yes.
That would be really cool because I think Minnesota might be ready to rip the Band-Aid off with that. And if the Bears keep losing, Justin Fields. I feel like if they end up saying, all right, it's Caleb or Drake time with how he's playing, as we'll get to a little later, you put that with that offensive line, Mike Tomlin, that could be fun. That could be really fun.
We'll get into it later, but Justin Fields is basically auditioning not only for his Bears future, but for his NFL future because he's in such a weird situation that it doesn't really matter how well he plays. Even if he wins out the rest of the season with the Bears, they might still end up with the number 1 overall pick. And if you have that pick, are you drafting Caleb Williams? Are you drafting Drake May? Probably. So there's a good chance that Justin Fields, even if he plays well, is on the move. I would love to see him go to Pittsburgh. Kirk Cousins, it does sound like there's a chance the Vikings consider re-signing him. I know they love him there. He's beloved in the locker room, but it's definitely a real possibility that he's gone as well. And the Steelers are likely going to be in the market for a quarterback, at least at this rate. I don't think that they could go into next season with Kenny Pickett as their starter, barring an unprecedented change as the season goes on. So yeah, I could totally see that.
Let's get into Justin Fields now because he's on our stock report where we figure out who thrived in week 11 and who was god awful in week 11 as well. We have one very prominent name, I believe, on a lot of our lists. And watching that Detroit-Chicago game in the earlier window before that came on, the Jets game came on when we really honed in on, I kept being amazed with Justin Fields, not like jaw dropping, but I'm like, there's no way he doesn't have something. He's way too talented, as I think you will attest to, Justin.
He is, and I think we're finally seeing even more of that. Obviously, he had he unfortunately missed some time this season, but he's back now. Dude gutted out a I don't want to say gritty performance because it's like I feel like that's always a backhanded compliment when you say, or backhanded comment when you say gritty. But he was genuinely very, very good in that game. It was a large reason that the Bears were leading that game for as long as they were. Unfortunately, they were not able to pull it out, but he finished 16 of 23, 169 yards and a touchdown. Of course, adding 18 carries, 104 yards on the ground. He was basically the whole offense. And we finally got to see that Justin Fields, the DJ Moore connection that they've been wanting to see. Like we saw it on full display this past Sunday. So stock way up for Justin Fields. Again, as we just mentioned, it's going to be tough for him to convince the Bears that they should stick with him moving forward. Obviously, a lot of it's just going to depend on really how the Panthers finish and where they end up and where that other pick that the Bears own ends up. Because if they end up with a top 2 pick, is a really good chance that they move off of Fields. But there is a chance that if he just plays lights out the remainder of the season, if he plays how he did this week, even if the Bears aren't winning a ton of games around him, if he shows that maybe he can be the guy, yeah, you could consider potentially moving off of that top 2 pick, even if you get it, and potentially trading it for a haul, because as we know, this is a very good quarterback class, or at least the top 2 is considered like 2, I don't want to throw the word generational out there, but 2 top level quarterback prospects, and Caleb Williams and Drake May. You can get a haul for that pick. So it's totally possible that Justin Fields can play himself into the starting consideration again for the Bears next season. And if it's not with the Bears, he's auditioning elsewhere. And I think regardless of where he ends up, his performance this week helped that stock.
I think it's just tough too, because they're almost 110% going to fire Matt Eberflus. So
yeah,
whoever they bring in is obviously going to probably want his guy. If you get the number 1 pick and you're not allowed to pick your guy at quarterback, so he's got that working against him too. But man, it just, for a good team, Detroit's a good team on the road.
They are.
And he's coming off an injury with no line and 1 receiver.
Yeah. And I know Jared Goff had a nightmarish Jared Goff game. This was like rookie year Jared Goff stuff that he was doing out there. But the Bears should have won that game. They but for all intents and purposes, they should have won that game. Unfortunately, it's the Bears. Like the talent gap eventually, the Lions were eventually able to overcome the talent gap essentially. But
you want to talk about nightmare?
Yeah,
Packers Chargers. I don't want to throw these allegations out because they're silly, because it is impossible. You know, it's illegal to like rig game. Like there would be a huge investigation. You can't rig a football game, an NFL game. But that was as close to point shaving as I've seen in years from these Chargers. Justin Herbert, number 1, first drive of the game, 4th and 4. Donald Parham, the tight end, has a ball where he's on his knees trying to catch it. There's not anybody, Charger or Packer, even on the screen.
Nope.
Drops it. Keenan Allen, the sun was in his eyes. Year 10 in the NFL, the sun's in your eyes does not work as an excuse. Walk-in touchdown. Boink. Drops it. Then Herbert, on 3rd down, trying to win the game, throws one of the 5 best throws in terms of degree of difficulty, how good it looks, circumstances, everything, to Quentin Johnson on the move, 40 yards down the sideline, beats his guy, drops it.
Yep.
And then they lose 23-20. Everybody's using this as fire Staley, and I get that because obviously Staley, I think, should be fired. I don't think he's a good coach, but like literally, Staley can't make guys catch the ball more. I mean, it's an indictment of Tom Telesco, because Tom Telesco, I think, got lucky and he found this super destroyer of a quarterback in Justin Herbert. And in much the same way that A.J. Smith, I believe was the guy's name, who was the GM when they had Marty Schottenheimer and young Phillip Rivers. Mm-hmm. And outside of Antonio Gates, like once LT got old and Antonio Gates got old, they can never like build a team around him. Same exact thing. It guts me Phillip Rivers never got to go to a Super Bowl. He was so good. And I feel like Herbert's going down the same path, only it's worse this time, because I feel like the Chargers would always at least like go 11-5 and 12-4 and then just kind of fizzle out. They're not even doing that now. I feel so bad for Herbert.
It's amazing to me how the Chargers just continue to find ways to do this stuff, because you would feel like watching that game, you'd think that Herbert's supporting cast was one of the worst in the league. When if you put it all together, the results end up being that way. But on paper, they shouldn't be that way. Keenan Allen has had an awesome year, and he's dropping a wide open touchdown pass. I know sun was in his eyes. He didn't have the tinted visor, whatever, right? He dropped the pass. He dropped the wide open touchdown pass. You already mentioned the Donald Parham thing. Austin Eckler, who is one of the best running backs in football, with a fumble earlier in the game as well. It's even the talented skill players on this Chargers team, this Chargers offense, that are letting them down. It's not just like Quentin Johnson, who has been a massive disappointment in his first season, although that drop late in the game in that fourth quarter, that was brutal to see. There's a stat I pulled up with Herbert here. Since the start of the 2020 season, Herbert is now the only active quarterback to have multiple games with receivers accumulating 6 or more drops. It's been a story for his entire career.
Lamar got another one in there too, because he's probably close.
And yet you still have people out here saying that, Justin Herbert should have done more. Hell, when he scored 38 points, when his team scored 38 points a couple weeks ago, and his defense allowed 42, you had people saying that he should have scored more than 38, that it's his fault. the Herbert narratives are insane. They drive me crazy. It's similar to the Josh Allen stuff. It's honestly even worse than the Josh Allen narratives to me. Herbert is a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. I know that the wins won't show that, and I know that if you look at the Chargers' overall success, it doesn't show that. But this Chargers team without Justin Herbert is bottom 5 in the NFL. I mean, with him, they're bottom 12. Like with him, they're bad. It's amazing to me how little help he continues to get, and how somehow the narrative and the blame shifts to him when you got people like Emmanuel Acho or whoever doing that. But I thought this was one of the best games, if not the best game that Herbert had played all year. Unfortunately, his team just let him down, as they tend to do.
Poor guy. Poor guy. You don't talk about poor guy, though. We got a quarterback in New York. Former starting quarterback Zach Wilson.
Mike, do we have to talk about this?
All right, I'll give you the cliff notes for the non-Jets fans. Zach Wilson is a historically bad quarterback. He's been that for 3 years. He continued to be that. And now he's been benched from Mike White, Chris Streveler, and Tim Boyle in consecutive seasons. I don't think any more needs to be said. He's obviously a stock down because your stock cannot go lower than this is rock bottom for an NFL quarterback. He might get a job as a practice squad guy next year. I don't even know at this point. I really don't. Would you sign him to be your third quarterback? I wouldn't.
There's a very real chance we've seen Zach Wilson play his last game in the NFL. And honestly, like, I feel bad for the guy. Obviously, I feel bad for the kid, but it's a long time coming. It's been a long time coming for the Jets. It is really hard to come back from getting benched for Chris Streveler and Tim Boyle in consecutive seasons. That's a CFL quarterback who could barely complete a 30-yard pass, and a quarterback in Tim Boyle who his entire career at UConn threw 1 touchdown and 13 interceptions, and then proceeded to throw more interceptions than touchdowns at an FCS school. Those are the guys that
Zach has more touchdowns than picks in the pros.
Yes, I know. And those are the guys that Zach Wilson has now been benched for in consecutive seasons. I mean, the entire Jets offense is a train wreck. Nathaniel Hackett is bad. The offensive line is an injury-riddled mess. I mean, they've now had 14 different offensive linemen play this season. Mike, do you realize, the last time the Jets have played a game without a starting offensive lineman suffering an injury? You know when that was?
I have to probably say it was last year.
No, it was this year. It was week 4 is the last game. The Jets have now had 7 offensive line injuries, or 7 injuries to starting offensive linemen in the last 6 games. That's unbelievable. So, yeah, I mean, it's
never have one all year.
Yeah, yes. I mean, look, I'm pretty sure the Falcons have started the same 5 offensive linemen every game this season. And I think other teams have probably done that too. Meanwhile, the Jets are fielding 3 different teams worth of offensive linemen. So it's obviously it's not just Zach Wilson. It's not just the quarterback position, but it was time to make a change. And I wish it was Trevor Siemian. Like, there's no reason it shouldn't be Trevor Siemian. There's also no reason, I believe Robert Saleh said today that the Jets plan to have all 3 quarterbacks active. I don't even want to get into that. I don't even want to talk about it. It makes me mad. I don't even want to discuss that.
We'll save that for the Wednesday Jet Press podcast.
We can save that. Yeah. We can save that for the unfortunate Jets deep dive on Wednesday. But yeah, it's all bad. Zach Wilson's bad. There's a very good chance we've seen him play his last game, not only in the Jets, but in the NFL. So absolutely,
I'm going to have to watch Tim Boyle film for that. So you better watch that, because that's what I'm going to have to do. Speaking of changes too, Justin is not a fan of what is going on in Washington, who let Tommy more touchdown passes than Zach Wilson DeVito, throw 3 touchdowns as the Commanders turn the ball over 6 times and lose.
Yeah, I feel like the writing's been on the wall here for a while. Ron Rivera will not be the Commanders' head coach next season. I'm pretty sure we can all see that. I'm honestly a little bit surprised that he wasn't fired after that loss. And I believe he gave the quote today, like, this is a new low. Yeah, it is. This is absolutely a new low for this organization. It's an organization that has had a lot of lows over the last few seasons, over the last many seasons, I would say. But yeah, I'd say losing to a quarterback in Tommy DeVito and a Giants offense that had just been putrid, like completely disgustingly terrible. A guy who the Giants didn't even want throwing a pass against the Jets a few weeks ago, having him throw 3 touchdowns against your defense. It's just embarrassing. And I know that the Commanders are always owned by the Giants. The Giants always find ways to beat the Commanders every single season. And clearly Tommy DeVito wasn't going to stop that, but it's time to make a change. I don't see a way that you can have Ron Rivera return next season. And I have a feeling that he's going to be fired midseason. I'm pretty sure that they're going to clean house. Hopefully you found someone in Sam Howell. I like his upside. I feel like when I watch Sam Howell, I feel like I'm watching Baker Mayfield, like younger Baker Mayfield. That sounds like an insult. I mean that in a complimentary way, but I feel like the upside is there with him. He's just very reckless. He takes a lot more sacks than he should, turns the ball over more than he should. But I think the upside's there with him. But you got to clean house with the coaching staff. It probably might happen midseason, but at the very least, Ron Rivera is definitely gone at the end of the year.
Sam Howell he plays like he's like a mental patient. Like it's frightening.
Yeah,
From drive to forget like game to game, drive to drive, series to series.
he's insane.
You don't know what you're gonna get. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes you get sacked 9 times. Like I've never been more confounded and confused in my life.
Yep.
By an NFL quarterback.
There was a way that I saw somebody describe Taylor Heineke one time, and I think this applies to Sam Howell. Taylor Heineke's best and worst trait is that he believes he's Josh Allen. And I think the same applies to Sam Howell. He's not quite as talented as Josh Allen, although he does have a very good arm, but he believes he's Josh Allen. He believes he's the best quarterback in the NFL every time he's on the field, and he's going to take the chances as if he's the best quarterback in the NFL.
He's got Gardner Minshew syndrome. We always think he's Mahomes.
It's admirable.
Going back to the AFC South, I'm extremely pleased with how the Jaguars played because Jacksonville got their rear ends kicked in every single facet by the 49ers. And I've always said on this show multiple times, like, no matter how good you are, sometimes every team gets 1 week where just nothing goes right. Just complete calamity. Doesn't matter how good you are, sometimes just nothing goes right. And that happened with Jacksonville. I put the Lions against the Ravens and they lost like 38-6. Like, sometimes it happens. But now how do you respond? Well, I get a division rival, a guy who I thought for all the chaos around him has been playing okay in Will Levis. Like second-round pick, guy who was raw coming in, doesn't have a great line, thought he's been playing okay, and they just beat the stuffing out of him.
Yep.
Both sides of the ball. Travis Etienne wasn't even having a great game, but Trevor Lawrence back in the groove, 4 touchdowns, 2 running, 2 throwing. Got to give credit to Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence, man, because they could have folded, especially with Houston now looking like a real team and not just like a team you got to worry about in the fringes. Like they're a real postseason contender. I think they might make it if they keep playing like this. They needed to have a game like this, and they're still, I think, the top dogs in the division.
They are. And I'm glad you brought that up because I feel like going into the season, everyone just kind of assumed that the Jaguars would win the AFC South. I mean, there was the Texans were taking a step with CJ Stroud there, but no one expected them to be this good. No one expected CJ Stroud to be this good. The Colts were there, but again, they had a young rookie quarterback, so no one really knew what to expect of them. And then the Titans were just hanging around, middling team, Ryan Tannehill coming back. They're kind of just going through a soft rebuild, going through the motions as they do.
Them to make the playoffs this year if you want an embarrassing prediction.
Oof, man.
My logic being, weren't they like 7-4 last year with Ryan Tannehill, and then he got hurt and they couldn't do anything?
I also think Mike Vrabel is a very good head coach, so I don't blame you fully there.
My theory there, though, is I think he's eyeing Belichick, and he's like, let me see if I lose enough, maybe they won't have to trade me. Then I can get canned and go succeed Belichick.
Oh, you think Vrabel wants to go to New England? Oh,
I think he does.
I mean, it would make sense. He played there. He played there when he was playing. But yeah, no, I love that the Jaguars were able to bounce back in the way that they are and show that they are one of the best teams in the AFC because that was the expectation going into the season. Trevor Lawrence had a big day. Calvin Ridley had a big day. I know he's been quiet for a few weeks, so it was nice to see him bounce back. This is a great Jaguars team. And I know like the final score is even less indicative of how dominant it was because I know the Titans were just kind of pulling out all the stops at the end. I know they had like the little flea flicker. Like they were just trying. They threw the touchdown pass to Jeffrey Simmons. They were kind of just throwing shit at the wall at the end. But for the most part, this was a blowout. I'm pretty sure the Jaguars were up 27-0 at a point. This is a really good Jaguars team. Credit to Doug Peterson for getting his guys to rebound after that tough loss. And yeah, as I'm looking at the stats, I'm also just realizing now that Tank Bigsby's real name is Cartavius. Didn't know that.
Cartavius?
Yeah. Cartavius Bigsby. I kind of like Tank. I'm not gonna lie.
I like Tank being the nickname for Carr Bigsby.
I like that Tank. That's true. I like that Tank is also the nickname for Nathaniel Dell because he's like 5'8", and that was pretty funny. It was
like when there's like a big guy and they call him like Tiny or something.
Yeah, and it was funny that we had 2 Tanks in the same draft class.
Well, it's like how Julio Jones's real name is Quintoris. So
right. I guess
actually, Trevor Lawrence's first name is William.
Yes.
So
yeah. Which is
it's not Cartavius, but it's not.
He definitely looks like a Trevor more than a William for sure.
He's the only Cartavius I know, but I know a couple more Jalen's, including Jalen Ramsey, who kind of caught Justin's eye in that game.
Yeah, I mean, since he's come back, he's been back for 3 weeks. This Dolphins defense, I believe, has been transformed. They've allowed fewer than 20 points, I think fewer than 17 points in each of his games since he's come back. He's the real deal. I think he's playing right now since he's been back. You could argue he's played like the best cornerback in the NFL. He's allowed a 0 passer rating when targeted since he's come back. He's had 3 interceptions in 3 games, including 2 this past week against the Raiders. He's the real deal. I know that Dolphins defense was shaky at points earlier in the year. There were some concerns. I know Vic Fangio coming in. A lot of people had high expectations, but there were some growing pains for sure. Now having him back is a massive boost to not only that secondary, but the defense as a whole, because they got some pieces there. I mean, Christian Wilkins, I think, is having the best year of his career as well. So this is really like, I want to say this is like a stock up for not just Jalen Ramsey, but for the entire Dolphins defense. Ramsey coming back elevates that defense, and it's honestly allowed them to overcome some, I would say, lackluster offensive performances, at least by their standards. Their offense isn't firing at the same rate as they were early in the year, but they've been able to overcome that because Ramsey is back and he's playing at such an elite level. I imagine that will continue when he goes up against the Tim Boyle-led Jets this Friday.
Why in the offseason was there this weird movement to say Jalen Ramsey was like washed or bad?
I don't know, man. It made me mad. I remember I have multiple friends who are Dolphins fans. I was talking with them, and I'm like, I don't know what people are on right now because Jalen Ramsey is still a top 5 cornerback in the NFL. He's one of the best defensive players in football.
It's just cornerback syndrome. You get beat on 1 touchdown, and they just replay it over and over. Sauce is going to have that Khalil Shakir touchdown. 5 years from now, they're going to be showing that.
Yeah, I literally, you see that post on Twitter, and everyone's commenting on it. It's like, oh, he's been getting burnt all year. This is what he does.
No, he hasn't.
What are you talking about? And it's the same thing with Ramsey. Ramsey's going to get beat 1 time this year, and everyone's going to be like, look, he's totally washed. He's completely washed. No, he's not. He's playing like the best cornerback in football right now. It's unfortunate he missed time because if not, he could be putting together an all-pro season right now.
Joe Burrow was playing like one of the best quarterbacks in football for the last couple of weeks up until his wrist gave out. And for a Bengals team I thought would make the playoffs, I think as Justin is going to point out, this is probably the end of Joe Burrow this year for the Bengals. And unless Jake Browning does the impossible, you can probably stick a fork in the Bengals.
Unless Jake Browning pulls whatever that 1 year he had at Washington out of his ass and he's just like goes off somehow.
And John Ross here, because the other years he didn't have John Ross. His shoulder got messed up too, but still.
That's the solution, Mike. They got to bring John Ross back to Cincinnati. You figured it out. That's what they need to do.
Oh, I forgot he was.
We need to reunite John Ross and Jake Browning with the Bengals. That's what we need to do.
If he runs that 40 a tenth of a second slower and he runs a 4.32 and not a 4.22, is he even picked in the top 50?
Definitely not top 10. He definitely does not go top 10. Probably not a first round pick.
Remember his rookie year when he had like 1 touch and he fumbled it?
Yeah. He kind of had Kevin White syndrome though, where he just kept getting hurt too. He could not stay healthy. And unfortunately, you can make the case that is kind of becoming a narrative with Joe Burrow. I hate the injury prone label getting thrown around all the time, but he's now had multiple significant injuries. And unfortunately, this one is going to keep him out for the remainder of the season. And yeah, I mean, it's going to be really tough for the Bengals to bounce back because this isn't like the Browns where they lose Watson, and not to mention, Watson obviously not playing at the same level as Burrow, but they lose Watson and their defense can bail them out because they have a great defense. The Bengals defense is not as good as the Browns defense. And they also have other holes in that offense. The Bengals offensive line is just not good. It's not. Like, they've had years to correct it and it's still not good. So for as good as Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd are, their offensive line isn't good enough. And now they have Jake Browning at quarterback. It's hard to see this Bengals team staying alive and making some kind of late postseason run. It's weird to talk about, but there's a very real chance. I know the Bills just bounced back against the Jets, but there's a real chance that both the Bills and the Bengals miss the playoffs this season, which is kind of a crazy thing to say, considering like what if we said that 3 months ago, what people would have said. I don't know, but yeah, it is a very real chance that the Bengals are definitely, I would say there's a very good chance that the Bengals don't make the playoffs this season. It's unfortunate that Burrow's out, but that's just where they are. And honestly, you can make the same argument about them that we've made about the Jets is why didn't they address backup quarterback in a more serious way? I know they had Trevor Siemian there in the summer. Jake Browning beat him out, and an undrafted rookie, or I think he's been in the NFL for like a year.
He's like bounced around.
Yeah, I don't think he's played in a game though. I believe last week, this past week was his first game. So yeah, it's just, you can make the argument that maybe they should have addressed backup quarterback more, but at the end of the day, you're not replacing Joe Burrow. And unfortunately, I think the Bengals season is probably all but over at this point.
Have you ever seen his high school stats?
Who, Browning?
How insane they are. Because he had like the record for high school touchdown pass for a little bit. Do you know how many he threw in 3 years?
3 years. I'm going to guess
high school ball.
I'm going to guess 110 or something like that.
229.
God.
He threw in his senior year, he threw 91 touchdown passes. That's insane.
What is the state? Where did he go to college? Where did he go to high school?
Somewhere Folsom, which is like in, I think, like Central California. So
Well,
like not a bad area for football.
No, I thought you were gonna be like Idaho, and I was gonna be like, well, that.
No, he's like from Sacramento.
Jesus Christ! Well,
91 touchdowns.
They need to watch back his high school film and see what they were doing there.
What's crazier, that or Derrick Henry? Remember Derrick Henry's last year where he had like 5,000 yards? And
I've seen his high school numbers. He's insane.
He's just like running over defensive linemen who were smaller than him. It's like, oh my God. So
it's nuts.
In terms of stock down, we're going to go to another Alabama guy because, well, Bryce Young tangentially. This is mostly on Frank Reich because, look, I think it's clear now that the Panthers made a huge whoopsie with the whole Bryce Young thing, which is funny too because the Texans wanted Bryce Young too. They didn't even want CJ Stroud, and then they just lucked into Stroud, and here we are. But we've seen a lot of bad quarterbacks, and we know the signs of when things are not going well. Like when they're beyond, he's a rookie, let him figure it out. Like Trevor Lawrence's rookie year, like you could tell, like, okay, like eventually he's gonna be good. You just got to stick with him. Or I don't even want to like bring guys' names up. You know, both number 1 overall picks. Screw it. Peyton Manning's rookie year, you're like, all right, he's gonna be good. Like we know he's gonna be good.
Mm-hmm.
Josh Allen to a degree. And then we also know the signs where it's like, okay, this is getting kind of scary. Like this is beyond the pale. And Bryce Young's hitting a lot of those marks. Well, he has nothing. If you have number 1, who gets picked number 1 overall as a quarterback and doesn't have nothing or next to nothing? He was small in college. He looks just so small. He is not 200 pounds. That is a straight up lie. He's listed at 204. He's not 204 pounds. We all see. He's 190, maybe. Right. And I want to rip Bryce Young, but he does have nothing around him. And Frank Reich, a coach who I liked, I thought he did a pretty good job in Indianapolis, all things considered. At the end, it got kind of shaky, but generally, thought he did a pretty good job, especially because he was brought in to coach Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck is great and then retires, and they had to mix and match quarterbacks this whole time. I'm like, oh, Carolina, this is perfect. Quarterback, mentoring a former quarterback, offensive guy. Perfect. They got nothing. They got no line. They got no receivers. Adam Thielen, zip it. They got no receivers. Tommy Tremble is a tight end. Whatever. Hayden Hurst. Defense is not bad, but I mean, my God, guys. You're going to get this guy killed. And 2 years later, you're going to be picking another quarterback. This is bad.
It's really bad. It's gotten to the point, by the way, where if you look at the EPA numbers, if you look at cumulative EPA per dropback, Bryce Young is currently worse than Zach Wilson was through the first 10 games of his career. So Bryce Young is on pace right now. He has worse numbers than Zach Wilson did at the start of his career. So it's bad. Like it's that bad. And obviously no one is out here blaming only Bryce Young. I find it hard to believe many, if any, rookie quarterbacks are succeeding in that situation. Unfortunately, it's stunting his development. It's completely stunting his development because he's not developing at all right now. Like I don't think he's gotten better throughout the course of the season, which is a very troubling sign for your first overall pick rookie quarterback.
What's his game? Even Zach Wilson, who stinks, at the Titans game, where you're like, oh, Zach Wilson, we got some. Has Bryce Young had that?
I don't think he's had that like signature quote unquote game. I don't think he's had one win in his career.
He scored 15 points in that game.
He had one game where he threw 3 touchdowns, but he also coupled that with 2 interceptions. And he was averaging 5.29 yards or 6 yards per attempt, which actually that's not that bad. But the last 3 games under 5 yards per attempt in his last 3 games. That's really bad. It's awful. And again, no one is saying it's only him. The offensive line is disgusting. Like it's really, really, really bad. There was a point this season where I was looking up stats. I was looking up stats with the Jets offensive line. And I stumbled across a stat about Panthers rookie guard Chandler Zavala, who I'm not sure how he's been since I saw this stat, but at the time when I looked it up, which was probably around like week 5 or 6, Chandler, and I didn't believe this. I don't know if I've seen a more ridiculous offensive line stat. Chandler Zavala had allowed twice as many pressures as any other offensive lineman in the NFL. How is that possible? When I looked at it, he had allowed 28 pressures. I think it was through like 4 games. No one else had allowed more than 14 at that point.
And he's a guard.
He's a guard. He's not even a tackle. Insane. Their O-line stinks. Their wide receiver core, which everybody knew stunk after they traded away DJ Moore. Everyone knew going into the season it was going to be bad. It does stink. Adam Thielen is having a good resurgent season, but a lot of it is also just volume. Like he's getting so many targets in that offense. Miles Sanders is not very good. Their running game is bad. Everything about that offense is bad. And I'm with you. I like Frank Reich, and I did think he did a good job in Indianapolis for a few years, but it's
they
not
didn't even
out.
want him, and he did a good job. They wanted Josh McDaniels. He was the replacement. He'd better than McDaniels would have done.
Definitely. Reich was their fallback. It's looking like it's going to be a one and done year for Frank Reich, which is unfortunate for Bryce Young because that means next year they're going to be going in and he's going to have his second new offensive coordinator because I'm sure Thomas Brown is gone as well. He's going to have a new head coach, hopefully going to have better pieces. I guess the only saving grace is that the Panthers don't have their first pick, so they're not going to replace him. That's the only saving grace for Bryce Young right now is that his job is safe. I don't think he's getting benched. I'm pretty sure he will be back as their starting quarterback next year, but they need to get him.
They basically did just trade DJ Moore, Jalen Carter, and Caleb Williams, and then more draft picks
for Bryce Young.
If
that's going to go down. If Bryce Young does not work out, which I really hope he does. Like I do hope he does. Again, it's similar with the Pickett discussion. What is his ceiling? Like, can he be a top 5 quarterback in the NFL? I don't think so. I think he can be a top 10 quarterback. I think my take about Bryce Young, he can be a mini Joe Burrow at his absolute ceiling. I think that's his ceiling. Mini both in size and quality. I think he'd be I think he'd be a slight. I'm sorry, I have to. I think he'd be a slightly worse Joe Burrow because I feel like he has similar strengths to Burrow. I don't see top 5 ceiling because of his size and because of his lack of elite physical traits. But I'm rooting for him. It's a bad situation for sure.
I mean, there was a draft this year. A guy came out who was 6'4", 240, ran a 4.4, 140. And you said, let's take a 5'10", 190-pound guy who didn't even have a great arm to begin with.
Did we learn nothing from Baker Mayfield going above Josh Allen?
Baker Mayfield's 5 times better than this.
No, I know, but I'm just saying when you have a freak like Josh Allen, and then even Lamar Jackson and Josh Rosen going.
I'll even give him that. Josh Allen in college was horrendous. So I'll even spot you that.
I'm well aware. I'm just saying. I feel like we've learned, the NFL has learned and should have learned more from that. I mean, maybe you could say the same thing with like Levis falling to round 3. Maybe he shouldn't have fallen to round 3 because of that. But
so let's get some rapid fire takes out of the way. Are there any of these games catching your eye, particularly mostly San Francisco, Tampa Bay? Brock Purdy good, Baker Mayfield okay. Niners keep rolling. That's about it. Texans, Cardinals, I feel like more of the same. I mean, the Cardinals are at least competitive with Kyler Murray. I think they hold on to him now. I think the discussion of are they just going to ship him off to whoever and they end up getting picks back, I think that's gone. I think they stick with him. And again, CJ Stroud, weird game, 3 picks, but I mean, I don't want to – it's like his first real bad game. Rams, Seahawks, Geno gets hurt. Drew Lock comes in. What'd you expect? Kind of thing. And then Broncos, Vikings – let Russ cook. He's not even really cooking. He's game managing. Let Russ game manage. But it's working.
It is. Vance Joseph's turned that defense around the last few weeks. That defense has quietly been carrying the Broncos offense, which has been fine. Like Russell Wilson has been significantly better this year than he was last year. He's not playing like the Russell Wilson that they expected to trade for, but I think he's playing at a level that they can win with if they get more pieces around him. I don't think the Broncos are going to make serious noise in the AFC this season, but Wilson's at least better. And that's good. I think that Sean Payton has done a good job with that offense and getting a lot more out of Russell Wilson than Nathaniel Hackett did last year. And I'm happy to see the defense has turned it around. Honestly, that Jets game kind of helped them out a little. I feel like after that Jets game, the defense kind of started turning around, which was part of it was getting healthy. Like they got back Justin Simmons, Josie Joel this time. They got him back. So they're playing well. They've won, 4 of their last 5, I think now. Denver's won. So good for them. And I think the Josh Dobbs – not that the Josh Dobbs like magical train is done, but I think people kind of saw a lot of his flaws in that game too, where he's not a franchise level quarterback. He's a fringe starter, probably at best at this stage, which is really fun and it's an awesome story, but I don't think he's leading them to a championship this season.
If only another team with a quarterback injury could have had that foresight.
Only other team that has a better roster than the Minnesota Vikings, at least a better defense for sure than the Minnesota Vikings could have used them.
Shame that team doesn't exist though, or else that would have gotten us really mad. So,
No,
so
fine. They're fine. They got Tim Boyle. They're good. They're
of
good.
course, Timmy Boyle, man, can sling it.
The other
But-
NFC, the other NFC North legend that's not Josh Dobbs, Tim Boyle.
Oh dear, oh dear. So let's get on to a real football game and not Nathaniel Hackett, which is not football. We're getting on to a Super Bowl rematch. The Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs, and both of them, I think the schedule makers were bad with predicting who would be good based on some of these matchups. They got it right with this one. Both of them are dominating. I think both of them are still the favorites to come out of their respective conferences, and it's looking like a rematch again in the Super Bowl is probably going to happen. Still, though, both these teams are coming in pretty wounded. Like, let's start with Kansas City first. Patrick Mahomes, still the best quarterback in the league.
Yep.
Did you know that he has the second most passes in front of the sticks in the league?
I did not know that. No, I mean, honestly,
you know who number one is?
It's
not Zach Wilson. It's not Bryce Young.
Is it like? I was going to say like Jimmy Garoppolo, but not because he got benched.
Daniel Jones.
Daniel Jones, sure, that makes sense.
Patrick Mahomes is being used in a way similar to how the Giants are using Daniel Jones. And I'd like to apologize to any criticism I may have offered at Eric Bieniemy because they clearly downgraded when they brought Matt Nagy back as friend of Andy Reid, this coaching fraternity. They brought him back. Such a clear downgrade.
Yeah.
From Eric Bieniemy. And I get that there are problems. Like the offensive line's still good and Isaiah Pacheco is okay. I get that he's working with this island of misfit toys wide receiver group where just they can't do anything right. I mean, Rashee Rice is pretty good, but he's still got drop issues and he's still a rookie. Kadarius Toney he'll have like one crazy weird big play and then he'll have drops and get hurt again. Sky Moore just gives you nothing. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, it's deep shots or nothing. Like, this is brutal. This is a hard-to-watch wide receiver core. And obviously Mahomes is Mahomes, so he's making the most of it. But even with a good offensive line, how many other quarterbacks in a Matt Nagy offense with probably Valdes-Scantling as your number one receiver, how many of them would succeed?
Not many. And I think we kind of knew this a little bit going into the season, that this was going to be a challenge with this receiving core. And unfortunately, it's been the case. And we haven't even seen, I feel like, the same level of play from Travis Kelce. And you could blame part of that on Matt Nagy if you want, but he's been quieter the last few weeks as well. The Chiefs offense is still going to be very good because they have the best quarterback in the NFL right now, one of the best quarterbacks we've ever seen play the sport. Their offensive line is also still good, and their defense is very good as well. Unfortunately, their skill position group is lacking. I mean, I like Isaiah Pacheco. I think he's a very good running back, but they got 15 drops among all their receivers this year. That's not good. And there's no real clear culprit among them. They're all just not very good. And you know, I'm interested to see how they match up against a very talented Eagles secondary. It's gonna be tough sledding. I don't think this is gonna be a high scoring, high powered offensive game, especially the Eagles are not, they're without Dallas Goedert as well. So I'm interested to see how it plays out. But I do think that Mahomes has been asked to kind of stand on his head and do more superhero stuff this year than he should be asked to.
And you can get away with that occasionally.
Yeah.
Because you're Patrick Mahomes. And you get away with that against inferior teams. With the Eagles, some stuff, or I was going to say could come home to roost, but I'm not going to do the pun. So some stuff could come back to bite you.
Yeah.
Ideally when everything's working, because I know they have a great offensive line, but does anybody have a better front seven right now than the Eagles? No, I mean, waves and waves of guys. Jalen Carter, my goodness. I mean, again, we know why did Jalen Carter fall to the Eagles? We know why Jalen Carter fell to the Eagles. There's a very big, scary reason that happened. I don't want to litigate it, but purely for a football reason, him and Jordan Davis, now they just got their defense figured out or the defensive interior, rather, figured out for the next 10 years immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And that has kept them in games where the offense has not been it had some troubles earlier. They've been better lately. They're still running the ball well. DeAndre Swift's been an amazing addition. Hurts is still running the ball really well. A.J. Brown's amazing. Top 5 receiver in the league, A.J. Brown. But there's just something about it. It's just not clicking. I think the Hurts turnovers were killing them. I don't know if they were forcing things. I don't know if Hurts felt he had to overcompensate for something. But it didn't look like the Jalen Hurts that took him to a Super Bowl.
We've also just seen growing pains, I think, with the departure of Shane Steichen. Like, I think that they've had to kind of figure out a new identity on offense. So the same core players are back, but when you have a significant change in offensive coordinator, it does go a long way, I think. And we've kind of seen those growing pains. I do think that the Hurts turnovers have been more prevalent this season as well, which has held them back. But ultimately, it's still a great offense. Obviously, they've only lost one game. They somehow lost the game to the Jets. I don't know how that happened looking back on it, but with an offensive line this talented, with a skill position group this talented, like you said, A.J. Brown, I think, has solidified himself as a top 5 wide receiver this season. DeAndre Swift is putting up great numbers for that team behind a very good offensive line. Jordan Mailata, Jason Kelsey, Lane Johnson, Landon Dickerson. There's a lot of really talented players. And, of course, the defense is their front seven is as talented as any in the league. And then, of course, Darius Slay and James Bradbury in that secondary. Reed Blankenship's having a good year. They got Kevin Byard now. Like, there's just so many talented pieces on this Eagles team that it's hard not to see them as a top 2 or 3 team in the NFL. And probably you could very easily argue that they're the best team in the NFL right now. And I would say, even though they're on the road in Kansas City tonight, I'd say the Eagles probably should be considered the favorites for this game just because of that. It should be an interesting game regardless, but I don't know. We could be previewing another Super Bowl matchup. I know it's a Super Bowl rematch, but we could be previewing this year's Super Bowl matchup. These are 2 of the best teams in the NFL.
Now, the concern that I have with the Eagles too defensively, in my opinion, now I think it's been tamped down a little bit. Earlier in the year, it was like a big, giant, blinking red light. Even with Kevin Byard and Blankenship, like, is that secondary still amazing? I mean, that's how teams are beating them, is throwing the ball. Like, they're not beating them. Only the Zach Wilson-led Jets have beat the Eagles this year, which sounds funny to say, but that's how teams have moved the ball against them, has been chucking it. And this is not the get-right game for a lot of these guys. This is not the game for Kevin Byard to get acclimated, especially after it looked like the pass defense got ripped up by Dallas game before. So I don't. Mahomes is not going to, I think, throw for like 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in this game just because the Eagles are too good outside of that, and he just doesn't have anything to work with receiver-wise. But this defense is not perfect, despite what a lot of I'm in Eagles country. I'm right near it. Despite what they may say, this is a flawed roster.
It is. I think that secondary, it's taken a step back this season. As good as James Bradbury and Darius Slay have been in recent years, they haven't been as good this season. I also think they've had a problem with the nickel corner position. Bradley Roby they brought in to maybe fix some of that. He's been pretty shaky from what I know. Kevin Byard absolutely helps matters because he is still one of the best safeties in football. But it is worth pointing out for sure that I think it's been a bit of a weakness. They've also had some linebacker turnover as well. I know that they brought in Zach Cunningham. It's not a perfect defense by any means, and I don't think it's as good as it was last season either. But that front seven just being as dominant as it is, their pass rush, their front four being as deep and as ridiculously talented as they are, it makes up for some of the issues that they have in their secondary and some of the lackluster play we've seen from guys like, James Bradbury. I don't think he's had as good of a season by any means as he was last year. So I do think that the Chiefs' lack of weapons is going to make it. I don't know if they're going to be able to take advantage of it as much as they should be able to, or as much as other teams would. I am interested to see who they have match up with Travis Kelce for a lot of this game because, their linebacker core isn't great, the Eagles. Nicholas Morrow's fine. They got him over from Vegas, from the Raiders. He's fine. Zach Cunningham has never been a coverage specialist by any means, and he's I would say not at the peak of his career at this point. So maybe it is a guy like Kevin Byard. Maybe they do throw someone like Bradbury who can probably match up physically with Travis Kelce. I'm interested to see how that matchup goes. But yeah, you're right. I think that is a fair concern to have about this Eagles team.
So now it's prediction time. What do we think is going to happen? I can't envision a world, this is just me, where an Eagles team that is very, very, very good, and I still think is the second best team in the NFC, San Francisco, I still think is number one, even with Brock Purdy and their losing streak. I can't envision a world where they're 9-1 and they beat the Chiefs at Arrowhead.
Really?
Can't envision that. I also have a hard time. I think Kansas City, they have problems. And every time, this has happened a couple times with them, where in the middle of the year, they kind of go off the reservation a little bit. And then Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes got to figure things out eventually. I feel like they're hitting that time. They always end up getting a little surge later in the year. So because of that, I'm going to have to call it 28-24 in favor of the Chiefs. What about you?
I don't hate that. I don't know, man. Maybe I might go with the advanced analytics here and say that since Travis Kelce or since Taylor Swift's not at the game, I think that means the Eagles are probably going to win because the Chiefs have found a way to win with Taylor Swift at games now. But I think that's fair. I think I'm still just going to go with the Eagles in this game. I think that they are the overall better team. I think they have a better roster. 9-1 is obviously that's a tough record to get to, obviously. And with that only loss coming to Jets, it's just so wild. But I think they pull it out. I think they end up winning this game. I'm trying to think of what I think the final score would be. I think it's lower scoring than people are expecting it to be. I think both defenses are still very, very good.
You're poisoned by the Jets. Teams can score more than 21
Maybe
points
it is.
in a game.
Maybe it is. Well, I'm not going to be like 13-10 final score. Maybe you're right. Actually, I don't think I've predicted more than 24 points in a game this season because I've only been doing Jets predictions. I'll say 21-17 Eagles win. That'll be my final prediction.
Ooh, okay. I like it. So we'll see who ends up being right on Monday Night Football. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, you can subscribe to Stack in the Box on YouTube. We got the Stack in the Box podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. All the platforms are over there. Make sure you like the stream. Make sure you give a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We thank Justin for coming on this week. Any final words, Mr. Freed?
I am hoping to see some better football this weekend from the New York Jets. That's my hope. I'm hoping that Black Friday is a better day, but of course it's going to be Tim Boyle starting. So I don't know.
I'm almost hoping not. Like I want to see. Like we were talking about this during this game because for those that don't know, the Jets had a streak that got broken of 41 consecutive drives without scoring a touchdown. I'm like, let me see how long he could go. I want to see it get to like 70 or 80, like something preposterous.
We're
and then they had to spoil it and score on a check down.
We're rewinding to the tank for Trevor year. That's what this is. That's if we're going. If we're doing that
right because they didn't get Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah.
Pity us poor souls. Check us out on the Jet Press podcast too. When you get a chance, we would be eternally grateful for that. Thank you for joining. That's Justin Free. I've been Mike Luciano, and we'll see you guys next Monday.
See ya.